The upscale art gallery buzzed with an electric energy as guests mingled under the soft glow of chandeliers. Sarah Mitchell stood nervously near her latest piece, a large canvas splashed with bold colors that told a story of passion and heartache. She had poured her soul into this artwork, hoping it would resonate with others and perhaps earn her the recognition she so desperately craved. The vibrant hues danced in the warm light, reflecting her ambition. But beneath her hopeful exterior lay a gnawing anxiety. "Isn't it just stunning?" a woman in a sleek black dress exclaimed to her companion, pointing at Sarah's work. The compliment sent a rush of optimism through Sarah. She smiled, clutching her glass of wine, eager to engage with anyone who appreciated her art. But her moment of triumph was short-lived. "Interesting choice of colors," a deep voice interrupted. Sarah turned to see James Hawthorne, the evening's guest of honor, standing before her piece. He exuded an air of confidence, dressed in a tailored suit that screamed wealth and power. "However, it seems a bit chaotic, don't you think?" His lips curled into a smirk, and the crowd around them quieted, sensing a spectacle about to unfold. "Chaos can be beautiful," Sarah replied, trying to keep her tone steady. "It reflects the complexities of life." James raised an eyebrow, amusement dancing in his eyes. "Complexity or confusion? There's a fine line, Sarah." He stepped closer, scrutinizing her work as if he were a critic at an art auction rather than a guest at a gallery opening. His dismissive tone sent a wave of heat to her cheeks, but she held her ground, unwilling to let him see how much his words affected her. "I think it's important to challenge perceptions," she countered, her voice firm despite the fluttering in her stomach. "Art isn't just about pleasing the eye, it's about evoking emotion." A ripple of laughter passed through the crowd, and Sarah's heart sank as she realized they were laughing at her, not with her. She felt small, exposed, and utterly humiliated. James's arrogance was palpable, and she could see the glint of condescension in his eyes as he continued to dissect her work. "Emotion, yes," he said, leaning back slightly as if to distance himself from her. "But there's a difference between provoking thought and creating a mess. Perhaps next time you might consider a more refined approach." With that, he turned, leaving Sarah standing there, frozen, the laughter of the crowd echoing in her ears. As the evening wore on, Sarah's heart felt heavy. She could hear snippets of conversation, whispers that echoed James's dismissive critique. "I didn't know art could be so chaotic," one guest said, and another added, "Who does she think she is? It's not even good." The words pierced her, each one a reminder of her failure, and she clutched her drink tighter, willing herself not to cry. Finally, unable to bear it any longer, Sarah excused herself from the gallery, her legs trembling as she made her way to the exit. The moment she stepped outside, the cool night air hit her like a refreshing wave, but it did little to soothe her wounded pride. She stumbled down the street, her mind racing with thoughts of James and the embarrassment she had just endured. Arriving at her studio, she closed the door behind her, the familiar scent of paint and linseed oil providing a small comfort. But as she surveyed the chaos of her workspace, brushes strewn about, canvases leaning against the walls, she felt more lost than ever. How could she have let someone like James Hawthorne affect her so deeply? He was just a man, one who had never known the struggles she faced as an artist. "Ugh," she groaned, throwing her bag onto the table. "Why does it always have to be like this?" Her voice echoed in the empty room, and she sank onto the floor, pulling her knees to her chest. The tears she had fought back all evening finally spilled over, and she let out a choked sob. A soft knock broke the silence, and Sarah looked up to see her best friend, Mia, standing in the doorway. "Hey, I came as soon as I heard," she said, concern etched on her face. "I figured you might need some company." "Thanks," Sarah whispered, wiping her eyes. I don't know, Mia. I thought tonight would be different. I thought I could finally get some recognition, but..." Her voice trailed off, the humiliation still fresh. Mia stepped inside, closing the door behind her. "What happened?" she asked gently, sitting beside Sarah on the floor. "You know I'm here for you." "James Hawthorne happened," Sarah replied bitterly. "He just stood there critiquing my work like he was some art god. He made me feel so small, Mia. I just wanted to show everyone what I could do, and he..." He just laughed at me." Mia's expression hardened. That arrogant jerk. He has no idea what it takes to create something meaningful. You can't let him get to you, Sarah. You're so much more than his opinion. "I know, but it's hard," Sarah sighed, looking at the mess of paint and canvas around her. "It's like every time I try to put myself out there, someone like him comes along and reminds me of how far I have to go." Mia placed a comforting hand on her back. "You're talented, and you have a unique voice. Don't let one person's arrogance overshadow that. You've worked too hard to let him ruin your passion." "Maybe you're right," Sarah said, though doubt still lingered in her voice. "But it's just so frustrating. I wish I could show him that he's not as untouchable as he thinks." Mia's eyes sparkled with mischief. "Well, why don't you? You're a fighter, Sarah. You've always been. If he thinks he can belittle you, then maybe it's time to remind him that you're not one to be underestimated." Sarah straightened up, a flicker of determination igniting within her. "What do you mean? Find something about him, something that reveals his true character. Everyone has secrets, right? Maybe it's time for him to face his own." As the idea began to take root in Sarah's mind, she felt a surge of adrenaline. Perhaps she could reclaim her dignity in a way that would make James regret his words. But just as quickly as the thought came, a nagging worry followed. Was revenge the answer? She pushed the thoughts aside, focusing on the larger picture. Maybe if she could uncover a secret about him, it would help shift the balance of power. The idea of standing up to James, of showing him that she wasn't just some struggling artist, began to take shape in her mind. Later that night, as Sarah sorted through her old files and sketches, she stumbled upon a yellowed newspaper article buried beneath a pile of forgotten papers. The headline read, "Local businessman faces scandal over alleged betrayal." Her heart raced as she scanned the article, recognizing the name mentioned within. It was James Hawthorne, and the piece detailed a scandal from years ago that had rocked the community. "Could this be what I've been looking for?" she murmured to herself, her pulse quickening. The words in the article hinted at a dark secret, something that could potentially ruin his reputation. Excitement coursed through her veins as a plan began to form. This wasn't just about revenge. It was about taking back her power, about standing up for herself in a way that would send a clear message to James. With renewed determination, Sarah began to research more about James's past, eager to uncover the truth. The wheels of her mind were turning, and for the first time in a long while, she felt a sense of purpose. As she delved deeper into the labyrinth of James's history, she knew that this was just the beginning of a reckoning neither of them could foresee. As the sun dipped below the horizon, casting an orange glow over the city, Sarah Mitchell sat at her cluttered desk, the remnants of her art supplies strewn around her, like the chaotic thoughts in her mind. The article she had stumbled upon earlier that day lay open before her, the yellowed pages whispering secrets of a past that James Hawthorne had long tried to bury. She felt a mix of anger and determination swell within her. She had been humiliated in front of everyone, and now perhaps she held the key to turning the tables. "Okay, Sarah, focus," she murmured to herself, pushing her hair back from her face. "You need to dig deeper." With renewed purpose, she opened her laptop and began to type, the clacking of keys echoing in the silence of her studio. Sarah scoured the internet for any mention of James, meticulously piecing together the fragments of his past. The more she uncovered, the clearer the picture became, a tale of ambition shadowed by betrayal and loss. Hours passed, and with each revelation, a failed business venture, a partner who had betrayed him, the whispers of a scandal, Sarah felt an exhilarating rush. "He thought he could break me," she said aloud, her voice steady. "But now I have something he wouldn't want anyone to know." The thought of wielding this knowledge like a weapon against him sent a thrill down her spine. The art world had always been a place of judgment, but now she stood on the precipice of reclaiming her dignity. The next day was a blur of research, phone calls, and late-night internet dives. Sarah immersed herself in local archives, rummaging through newspaper clippings and online forums, piecing together the puzzle of James's rise to fame. She spoke to old friends of his, who were all too eager to share stories of the cutthroat nature of his business dealings. "He's ruthless," one former associate had said, his voice tinged with bitterness. He'll do whatever it takes to get what he wants. You might want to be careful, though. Careful, Sarah had retorted, her heart racing. This isn't about caution anymore, it's about truth. After hanging up, she stared out her window, the city lights twinkling like stars. I won't let him walk all over me again, not after what he did. With a plan forming in her mind, Sarah began to envision a confrontation. She pictured herself standing before James, confidence radiating from her as she revealed the truths she had uncovered. You think you're untouchable, don't you? She imagined saying, her voice steady, her eyes piercing. But I know all about your past, James, and it's time everyone else did too. She could almost taste the satisfaction of his shock, the way his face would pale as the weight of his secrets bore down on him. As the days went by, she meticulously crafted her approach, practicing her words in front of the mirror, her determination growing with each passing moment. But the anticipation also brought a swell of anxiety. What if he dismissed her? What if he laughed? The thought gnawed at her, but she quickly pushed it aside. You're not backing down, she muttered, clenching her fists. Then came the invitation to the charity gala hosted by James. It was the perfect opportunity, a gathering of the city's elite, a place where she could confront him amidst the clamor of the crowd. Sarah stood in front of the mirror, adjusting her dress. The fabric hugged her curves, a deep navy that contrasted beautifully with her fiery red hair. She took a deep breath, steeling herself for the night ahead. You can do this, she whispered, her heart pounding in her chest. When she arrived at the gala, the atmosphere was electric. Laughter and chatter filled the air, mingling with the clinking of glasses. Sarah navigated through the sea of well-dressed guests, her heart racing as she searched for James. He was easy to spot, standing near a grand painting, conversing with a group of admirers, exuding the confidence of a man who believed himself invincible. Just get closer, she whispered to herself, her palms sweating as she approached. She could hear snippets of their conversations, laughter punctuating the air, but her focus remained on James. She could see the way people looked at him, with admiration and envy, and it made her stomach twist. You don't deserve this, she thought, her resolve hardening. As she wove her way through the crowd, she overheard snippets of conversations that only fueled her determination. Did you hear about the deal he made last year? He really knows how to play the game, one woman said, her voice dripping with admiration. He's practically a legend in the business world, another chimed in. Sarah's lips curled into a tight smile. Legend, she scoffed silently. More like a fraud. The closer she got, the more she felt the weight of the moment. She could confront him right then and there, but she wanted it to be perfect. She needed him to feel the impact of her words, to understand the depths of his arrogance. After what felt like an eternity, she found herself standing just a few feet away from him, her heart pounding in her chest. He was laughing, his head thrown back, completely unaware of her presence. Now, she thought, her breath hitching in her throat. But before she could step forward and make her presence known, a voice interrupted her thoughts. Sarah, is that you? Mia's cheerful tone cut through the crowd, pulling Sarah back into reality. She turned to see her best friend approaching, a bright smile on her face. You look stunning. Are you ready for this? Sarah forced a smile, grateful for the distraction. I think so. Just trying to figure out how to approach him. Mia glanced over at James, her expression shifting from excitement to concern. Are you sure you want to do this? You know he's not going to take it lightly. I have to, Mia. I can't let him get away with what he did to me. Sarah's voice was firm, but a hint of doubt lingered in her heart. Just promise me you'll be careful, okay? Mia said, squeezing her hand. You deserve to stand up for yourself, but don't let him provoke you. He's dangerous. I know, Sarah replied, her stomach churning, but this is my moment. I can't let it slip away. With that, she turned her gaze back toward James, determination flooding her veins. The sea of guests parted as she stepped forward, the moment of reckoning drawing nearer with each heartbeat. She could feel the tension in the air, the anticipation of the confrontation tinged with excitement and fear. Here goes nothing, she murmured to herself, her heart racing as she took a deep breath and prepared to face the man who had once crushed her spirit. The night was just beginning, and she was ready to reclaim her power. In the dimly lit corner of the gala, Sarah Mitchell's heart raced as she stared at James Hawthorne, the man who had unknowingly become the catalyst for her transformation. The opulence of the event surrounded her, with shimmering chandeliers casting a golden glow over the crowd, but she felt as if she were in a bubble, isolated from the laughter and chatter around her. Gathering her courage, she stepped forward, pushing through the throngs of elegantly dressed guests, her mind a whirlwind of emotions. "James," she called out, her voice steady despite the storm brewing inside her. He turned, his expression shifting from casual indifference to mild surprise as he recognized her. She could see the flicker of amusement in his eyes, a remnant of the arrogance he wore like armor. "Ah, Sarah Mitchell," he said, a smirk creeping onto his lips. "What brings you here? Shouldn't you be painting or, I don't know, struggling in obscurity?" His tone dripped with condescension, and the sting of his words ignited something deep within her. "I know about the betrayal," she declared, her voice cutting through the air like a knife. The words hung between them, heavy with implication. The moment felt suspended in time, the laughter and music fading into the background as James's expression shifted, the smirk faltering for the briefest second. "Excuse me?" His brow furrowed, and for a moment, Sarah saw a flicker of genuine surprise. "What are you talking about?" "I read the article," she pressed on, her heart pounding. "The one about your former business partner, the one you abandoned. I know what you did to climb to the top. It's time someone held you accountable." James's laughter erupted, loud and mocking, echoing through the corner of the gala. "You think you can threaten me with a tabloid article? You've got it all wrong, Sarah. I didn't abandon anyone. I made a business decision. It's cutthroat out here. You should know that." He straightened up, adjusting his cufflinks, the very picture of self-assuredness. But Sarah stood her ground, her anger fueling her resolve. "A business decision?" she echoed, her voice rising. "You destroyed lives, James. You left people in the dust for your own gain. There are consequences to your actions, and it's time you faced them." His demeanor shifted then, the laughter fading as he took a step closer, his eyes narrowing. "You don't know what you're talking about. You think you can come here and lecture me about morality? Look around you, Sarah. This is the real world. It's not about right or wrong. It's about winning." His voice was low, each word dripping with contempt. "But at what cost?" she shot back, feeling emboldened by her own passion. "You may have wealth and power, but you've lost your humanity. You've crushed people under your heel, and I won't stand by and let you get away with it. You think you're invincible, but I'm not afraid of you." James scoffed, crossing his arms over his chest, the remnants of his bravado still intact. "And what exactly do you plan to do? Write another sad little painting that nobody will care about? You're out of your league, Sarah." The words cut deep, but she refused to let him see her falter. "I'm not just an artist. I'm someone who believes in justice, and you're not untouchable. Your past will catch up with you, and I'll make sure of it." For a moment they stood there, locked in a battle of wills, the tension palpable. Sarah could see the wheels turning in James's mind, the arrogance slowly giving way to something more defensive. "You really think you can expose me?" he asked, a hint of uncertainty creeping into his voice. "What do you have, just some article from years ago?" "I have the truth," she replied, her voice steady. "Something you clearly know nothing about. You may be able to manipulate your world, but the truth has a funny way of coming to light. I'm not afraid to shine a spotlight on it." James's expression hardened, his facade slipping as he took a step back, the confidence he projected wavering. "You're playing a dangerous game, Sarah. You have no idea who you're dealing with." There was an edge to his voice now, a note of warning that sent a chill down her spine. "I'm not afraid of you," she insisted, her heart racing with adrenaline. "You think your wealth can shield you from the consequences of your actions? You're wrong. I'll make sure everyone knows what you really are." "Do you think anyone will care?" he replied, a bitter laugh escaping his lips. "People like me are untouchable. You're just another struggling artist trying to make a name for yourself. You really think you can take me down? I'm not some amateur." Her heart sank for just a moment, but she quickly steeled herself, refusing to show weakness. "Maybe you're right. Maybe no one will care, she said, her voice low but fierce. But I will, and I'll fight until the truth is out there. With that, Sarah turned on her heel and walked away, her pulse pounding in her ears. She felt a rush of empowerment coursing through her, a sense of purpose ignited by the confrontation. As she navigated through the crowd, she glanced back, catching James's gaze. The confidence he had worn so effortlessly was replaced by a flicker of uncertainty, and for the first time, she could see the cracks in his armor. Outside the gala, Sarah took a deep breath, the cool night air hitting her like a splash of cold water. She leaned against the wall, feeling the weight of the moment wash over her. She had confronted James Hawthorne, and despite the lingering doubts, she felt a sense of clarity. The seeds of her plan had been planted, and she was ready to see it through. Meanwhile, inside the gala, James stood rooted in place, his mind racing. The confrontation replayed in his head, her words echoing like a haunting melody. "You're playing a dangerous game," he muttered to himself, his bravado slipping away. She was not just some artist he could dismiss. She was a force of nature, and he had underestimated her resolve. He watched as Sarah disappeared into the night, the reality of her threat settling in. For the first time, he felt the weight of his past pressing down on him, and the implications of her words loomed large. The world he had built on ambition and ruthlessness suddenly felt fragile, and he couldn't shake the feeling that the game was far from over. Sarah stood in her cluttered studio, the walls adorned with canvases that depicted her innermost struggles and triumphs. The faint smell of paint lingered in the air, a reminder of the countless hours she had poured into her work. But today, her heart was racing for a different reason. She had made the decision to reach out to a journalist she had heard about through the art community, someone known for digging up hidden truths and exposing the corruption of the wealthy elite. This was the moment she had been waiting for, the chance to turn the tables on James Hawthorne, the man who had so callously belittled her just weeks ago. As she typed out the email, her fingers hesitated above the keyboard. What if this was a mistake? Was she really ready to plunge into the depths of revenge? The thought of confronting James again, but this time with an arsenal of truths, sent a shiver down her spine. She had spent countless nights replaying the gala in her mind, the moment she had confronted him echoing louder with each passing day. "Sarah?" Mia's voice broke through her reverie, pulling her back to reality. The door creaked open, and her best friend entered, her expression a mix of concern and curiosity. "You've been quiet. What's going on?" "It's about James," Sarah replied, her voice barely above a whisper. "I found something that could change everything." Mia raised an eyebrow, crossing her arms as she leaned against the doorframe. "Are you sure it's a good idea to go after him? I know he hurt you, but revenge can be a slippery slope." Sarah sighed, running a hand through her hair in frustration. "I know, but he treated me like I was nothing. I can't just let that go. This is my chance to reclaim my dignity." Mia stepped closer, her expression softening. "What do you plan to do?" "I contacted a journalist. I'm going to share everything I found out about his past. He may have wealth and power, but he's not untouchable. He has secrets, and I'm going to expose them." Mia's eyes widened, a mix of admiration and concern flickering across her face. "That's bold. Just make sure you're ready for the fallout. You know how powerful he is." "I know." Sarah took a deep breath, feeling the weight of her decision settle in her chest. "But I have to do this. It's not just about him anymore. It's about me standing up for myself." As Mia nodded, a look of determination crossed her face. "Then I'm with you. Just promise you won't lose yourself in all of this." They spent the next few hours strategizing, Sarah outlining her findings while Mia took notes, her enthusiasm infectious. Each revelation about James's past felt like a layer of armor being wrapped around Sarah's heart. The more she uncovered, the more empowered she felt. It was as if she was reclaiming a part of herself she thought had been lost forever. Later that evening, Sarah sent the email to the journalist, her heart pounding in her chest. She knew there was no turning back now. As the days passed, she anxiously awaited a response, her mind racing with possibilities. What if the journalist dismissed her claims? What if James caught wind of her plans before she was ready? The uncertainty gnawed at her. Meanwhile, James was not idle. He had sensed a shift in the air after the gala, a quiet tension that seemed to linger in the spaces between his interactions. He had noticed Sarah's newfound confidence, the way she carried herself with a fire he hadn't seen before. It unsettled him. His instincts told him she was up to something, and he was determined to find out what. In his lavish office overlooking the city, he leaned back in his leather chair, staring out the window as the sun dipped below the horizon. "What are you planning, Sarah?" he muttered to himself, his brow furrowed in thought. He knew he had enemies, people who would jump at the chance to undermine him. But Sarah? She was an unexpected variable, one that he had underestimated. He grabbed his phone and dialed his assistant. "Get me everything you can on Sarah Mitchell," he commanded, his voice steady and authoritative. "I want to know her connections, her past, everything." As he hung up, a sense of unease crept over him. He had built his empire on the ruins of betrayal and deception, but he had never imagined that his own actions would come back to haunt him through someone like Sarah. The thought of her exposing him, of unearthing the skeletons he had buried, sent a jolt of panic through him. Back in Sarah's studio, the journalist finally responded. They agreed to meet at a local cafe, a cozy spot filled with the scent of freshly brewed coffee and the soft murmur of conversations. As Sarah entered, she spotted the journalist, a sharp-eyed woman named Claire, sitting at a corner table. Claire had a reputation for being relentless, and Sarah felt a thrill of excitement mixed with anxiety as she approached. "Sarah Mitchell, right?" Claire greeted her with a firm handshake, her expression professional yet warm. "I appreciate you reaching out. I've heard quite a bit about you." "Thank you for meeting with me," Sarah replied, taking a seat across from her. "I have information about James Hawthorne that I think you'll find interesting." Claire leaned in, her interest piqued. "Go on." As Sarah laid out her findings, she could see the gears turning in Claire's mind. The journalist scribbled notes furiously, her expression shifting from curiosity to intrigue. "This is compelling," Claire said, her eyes glinting with excitement. "But why do you want to expose him?" "Because he humiliated me," Sarah replied, her voice gaining strength. "He's walked all over people to get where he is, and I refuse to let him do the same to me. This isn't just about revenge, it's about justice." Claire nodded, her demeanor shifting to one of respect. "I understand, but I must warn you, going after someone like James can have serious repercussions. Are you prepared for that?" "I am," Sarah said, her voice steady. "I've thought this through. I want my story told." As they wrapped up their meeting, Sarah felt a mix of exhilaration and trepidation. She had taken a significant step towards reclaiming her narrative, yet a nagging doubt lingered in the back of her mind. Was this truly the path she wanted to walk? In the days that followed, Sarah's confidence began to waver. As she worked on her art, her thoughts drifted back to the confrontation at the gala. The fire she felt was being overshadowed by the weight of her actions. What if exposing James only caused more harm than good? Her art was her voice, a way to express her innermost thoughts and feelings. But now, it felt overshadowed by the looming storm of revenge. Meanwhile, James had uncovered details about Sarah's past, her struggles, her journey as an artist, and he began to craft a narrative that could undermine her credibility. The thought of exposing her vulnerabilities ignited a fierce determination within him. He couldn't let her take him down. He would not be the victim of her revenge. At a high-profile dinner event a few nights later, James stood before a crowd of influential guests, the spotlight shining down on him. He felt the weight of their expectations and the pressure to maintain his carefully constructed image. "Ladies and gentlemen," he began, his voice smooth and charismatic, "I'd like to take a moment to address the importance of originality in art. In a world where we are surrounded by imitators, it is crucial to recognize the true visionaries." His gaze swept over the audience, landing on Sarah, who was seated across the room, her expression a mix of defiance and uncertainty. "Some may claim to be artists, but without authenticity, their work is merely a shadow of true creativity." Gasps rippled through the crowd, and Sarah felt her heart race. The implications of his words hit her like a punch to the gut. He was insinuating that her art was derivative, unoriginal, and it stung deeper than she had anticipated. She could see the glances exchanged among the guests, the whispers beginning to circulate. "Let us celebrate those who dare to push boundaries and create something truly unique," James continued, his voice steady, but a fire ignited behind his eyes. "It takes courage to be genuine, and I commend those who rise above the noise." As the applause erupted around her, Sarah felt the walls closing in. This was more than just a challenge, it was a declaration of war. James was not going to let her expose him without a fight, and suddenly, her plan to reclaim her dignity felt more precarious than ever. She took a deep breath, her mind racing. It was no longer just about revenge, it was about survival. She had stepped into a world filled with power plays and manipulation, and the stakes were higher than she had ever imagined. As the clamor of the crowd washed over her, Sarah felt the weight of her decision pressing down like a heavy cloak. She had to prepare herself for what was to come, for both her art and her spirit were on the line. The atmosphere in Sarah Mitchell's studio felt charged with tension as she paced back and forth, her mind racing. The clock on the wall ticked ominously, counting down the hours until the article about James Hawthorne was set to be published. Just as she was about to immerse herself in her next piece, her phone vibrated violently on the table, jolting her from her thoughts. She glanced at the screen and noticed an unknown number flashing. "Hello," Sarah answered, a sense of unease creeping into her voice. "Sarah Mitchell," a gravelly voice replied, the tone eerily calm. "You need to be careful. I just heard that James is planning something. He knows about your article." Her heart dropped. "What do you mean he knows? Who is this?" "I can't give you my name, but trust me, he's not going to let you take him down without a fight. You need to prepare for a counterattack," the voice warned before abruptly hanging up. The silence that followed was deafening. Sarah's pulse quickened as she sat down, her hands trembling. This was no longer just about her art or her dignity. It was a war now. James's arrogance had escalated to a point where he would fight back, and she had unknowingly entered a battle she couldn't afford to lose. She glanced at the article draft on her laptop, the words she'd poured her heart into, and suddenly felt a wave of doubt wash over her. "What if he does something drastic?" she whispered to herself. The thought of her vulnerabilities being thrown into the public eye sent a chill down her spine. She needed a strategy, and she needed it fast. Determined not to be caught off guard, Sarah decided to seek advice from someone who knew the industry well. Her former mentor, Clara, had always been a guiding light in her artistic journey. Clara had been a fierce advocate for Sarah's work and had navigated the treacherous waters of the art world with grace and strength. If anyone could offer her insight into dealing with someone like James, it was Clara. With a deep breath, Sarah dialed Clara's number. After a few rings, the familiar, warm voice answered. "Sarah, it's been a while. How are you?" "Clara, I need your help," Sarah said, urgency layering her words. "Things have escalated with James Hawthorne. I've uncovered some information about his past that I'm about to publish, but I just got a tip that he's aware of it and planning to retaliate." There was a pause on the other end, a silence that spoke volumes. "I see. Sarah, you know how powerful he is. You have to be very careful. This isn't just about art anymore. It's about your reputation and safety." "I understand," Sarah replied, feeling a mix of anxiety and determination. "But I can't back down now. I've spent too much time on this." Clara sighed, her voice softening. "I admire your tenacity, but you need to think about the consequences. James has connections, and he's not above using them. Have you considered what he might dig up on you? People with power often play dirty." Sarah felt a knot tighten in her stomach. She had worked hard to build her reputation, but her past was not without its shadows. "What do you mean?" she asked, feeling a sense of dread. "You've had struggles, Sarah. Your early career was filled with rejections and financial hardships. If he wanted to, he could paint a picture of you that contradicts everything you've worked for," Clara warned. "But I can't let him intimidate me," Sarah insisted, her voice rising slightly. "I won't let him silence me just because he's afraid of the truth coming out." "Of course you shouldn't be silenced," Clara responded, her tone firm yet compassionate. "But think strategically. If you're going to confront him, make sure you have something to protect yourself with too. Document everything. Know your own vulnerabilities and be prepared for the worst. Sarah nodded, even though Clara couldn't see her. I will. Thank you, Clara. I need to get through this. Stay strong, Sarah. You're not alone in this. Reach out if you need anything, okay? Clara's voice was reassuring, a steady anchor amidst the storm. After hanging up, Sarah felt a surge of determination. She had to outsmart James, not just to defend herself, but to reclaim her narrative. As she prepared for the worst, she spent the night gathering evidence, meticulously documenting her own past successes, failures, and everything in between. It was essential to present a complete picture of who she was, one that couldn't easily be tarnished by James's manipulation. The night dragged on, filled with the sound of her keyboard clacking as she worked tirelessly. But just as she began to feel a sense of control, her phone buzzed again. This time it was Mia. "Hey, Sarah, you're going to want to sit down for this," Mia said, her voice laced with urgency. "What is it?" Sarah asked, her heart racing. "James has been digging into your past," Mia revealed, the weight of her words hanging heavy in the air. "He's got people looking into your history, and they're finding things that could really hurt you." Sarah's breath hitched in her throat. "What kind of things?" "Just things from your early career. The rejections, the financial struggles. It's all out there, and he's not above using it against you," Mia explained, concern edging her tone. No, this can't be happening," Sarah said, her voice trembling. "I thought I'd moved past all of that." "Sarah, listen to me," Mia urged. "You're stronger than this. Just remember who you are and what you've accomplished. Don't let him scare you into submission." Tears pricked at the corners of Sarah's eyes as she fought to maintain her composure. "I know, but it feels like he's playing with fire. He knows how to aim for my vulnerabilities. Then you need to be prepared. We can counter whatever he tries to throw at you. Let's put together a plan," Mia said, her determination infectious. Sarah took a deep breath, the warmth of Mia's support wrapping around her like a shield. "You're right. I can't let him win. I won't let him take my power away." With a renewed sense of purpose, Sarah began to strategize with Mia. They brainstormed potential responses to any attacks James might launch, drawing from Sarah's strengths and the support system she had cultivated over the years. As the night wore on, they mapped out a plan, a strategy that would allow Sarah to not only defend herself, but to rise above James's intimidation tactics. With each idea, Sarah felt more empowered, more in control. She realized that while James might have power and connections, she had something far more potent: resilience and a community that cared for her. The clock ticked steadily, and as dawn broke, Sarah felt a sense of clarity that had eluded her in the chaos. She was ready. The article was set to release, and whatever James had planned, she would face it head-on, armed with her truth and the strength of those who believed in her. The battle wasn't just for her reputation, it was for her future, and she would fight for it with everything she had.